All right, this is problem number 8 from chapter 15.6. It's asking us, in 2015, Richard Fuld, the last CEO of Lehman Brothers, gave a talk in which, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, he outlined what called the perfect storm of events that led to the financial crisis, saying it all started with the government and policies that subsidized cheap loans for people to buy homes in order to help them chase the American dream. A. Briefly outline the events that led to the financial crisis. Do you agree with Fuld that the events constitute a perfect storm? Essentially, would it have been difficult to anticipate? Let's start with part A, and it's asking us the order of events, and it's hard to exactly outline the order, but let's start with housing market boom. So there's a big housing market boom, and it's a great time to buy, and everything's cheap, but all the prices are also rising. So everyone's like, oh, it'll keep rising. Why not just buy? Then the introduction of mortgage-backed securities, which is like a security being some sort of financial asset that has its value linked to a mortgage. So once someone pays off their mortgage, you get the return. And of course, that carries the risk of someone defaulting on their mortgage. Then the housing bubble burst. So I'm just going to do a little down arrow for the burst. And now mortgage-backed securities are worthless. And lots of big banks, such as Lehman Brothers, had tons and tons and tons of mortgage-backed securities that are now worthless, and they're now out a ton of money, and they go bankrupt. So that's the outline of events that occurred, basically, in a very, very simplified manner. Obviously, a lot more happened. But for the next part of the question, it's asking us, was this something that could have been predicted? Essentially, was this a perfect storm? And while, in a sense, it was a perfect storm in terms of it was pretty much unprecedented outside of the Great Depression, I do think it could have been predicted to an extent. I mean, there were people who predicted it. There were people who bet on it happening and profited off of it. But at the same time, it is difficult to predict. I think people were a little bit too ignorantly blissful, I guess, about the housing market. And if they had paid more attention to that, maybe they would have realized that a bubble was forming and that they shouldn't keep just buying and buying and buying. So let's move on to part B. Part B is asking us for specific government policies that could be seen to be subsidizing cheap loans. That essentially led to this happening. And so, the first one is making loans cheaper, subsidizing loans for housing in a way to stimulate the market. That's definitely the housing market. That's definitely one. Another one is subprime mortgage securities, which is basically lending money to people who don't have the best credit and might not be the most likely to pay off their loan, again, because people were ignorant and didn't realize that they weren't going to get paid back and that people would default. Those were two very prominent policies that occurred that basically led to the bubble forming and bursting. And so the last part is, what does Fuld mean when he says these policies were intended to help people chase the American dream? Well, they were intended to make people's lives easier, right? They were intended to make more people have access to housing. And the problem is that while that's nice in theory, if people are going to if that ends up having a huge burden on the economy, then when everything fails, it's going to have a huge impact on the economy like we saw in the recession.